Hello and welcome to the Naked Expat channel. Today is one of my monologues, and usually I'm under the yellow guava tree, but we've had a lot of rain the last week or so the ground's a bit soft. I think if I stuck a chair out there I'll probably sink. Another one of my famous throws. Hopefully this one's not as off-putting as the other one that you guys complained about on the sofa inside. Anyhow, what am I going to talk about today? There's a lot of talk online about how tourism is down. But I don't think that's just specific to the Philippines. I think tourism is down in general because the global economy is in a bit of a slump. A lot of countries, like Thailand, for example, depend a lot on Chinese tourism, and that's massive. I think Indian tourism is going to become more of a major driver in the future as wealth and the middle class expands in India. But certainly over the last, say, decade, China tourism has been massive, and I saw it firsthand in Thailand. The only problem with Chinese tourism is, although individual Chinese that are relatively wealthy will go to places like London, New York, Paris, Milan, and they will go to the designer boutiques and spend a lot of money on labels, on brand names. That's the wealthy Chinese. The average, dare I say it, Chinese tourist, there's a tendency, the Chinese tourists don't really mingle and wander themselves around different districts and explore on their own. You generally see them like it's a herd mentality. You see 50 or 100 of them piling into these big coaches and being ferried everywhere. And their every move is sort of controlled and monitored by their tour operators. And these tour operators, I know from some friends that were in business in Thailand, they found it really frustrating that although the government and local statistics were like, oh, well, there's like a 50% uptick in Chinese tourism in Thailand. They were like, well, we're not seeing any of it because these tour operators are in bed with certain preferred providers. So they all get coached to one place and they eat in the preferred restaurant, like buffet style for lunch. Then they get carted off to a crocodile farm, and then they get carted off to have dinner in a preferred restaurant. And it's all kind of like almost like a mafioso cartel run sort of thing. And the local vendors don't really benefit that much. And that's very, very true. The Philippines maybe doesn't see as much of the mass herd tourism, but certainly a lot of people that live in places like Cebu have been commenting recently that there seems to be, it just feels like there's less expats and less tourists around. They see less foreigners in the shopping malls and in the bars and in the restaurants. And I think that's indicative of the global economy. Flights are much more expensive. I dream of getting flights from Asia to Europe and Europe to Asia like I did previously for sort of £400, £500, sort of $500, $600. That just doesn't happen anymore unless you get rerouted everywhere to sort of via Kathmandu or something and have 6 different stopovers or whatever, and it takes a week to get here, or you fly in cargo. It just doesn't happen. So flights are expensive. I think certain countries have departure taxes and landing taxes, fuel duties, fuel surcharges. It is more, although air travel is probably as cheap now as it's ever been sort of globally, insofar as it used to be a rarity and a novelty in the 1970s. I can remember in 1976, my parents threw me and my brother over to America from the UK to celebrate bicentennial year, 200 years of American independence. And it was unusual for a family of 4 from the UK to travel in 1976 over to America because it was hellishly expensive. We were only able to do it because my father was at Oxford with a guy called Otto who was American, and his family was in Long Island in New York, and they obviously put us up for a couple of months. And then we were able to enjoy 1976 sort of bicentennial celebrations in America, and also the Montreal Olympics. I was too young to really remember it all. Apparently my father says at one point I was in the same town as Elvis a year before he died. Didn't get to meet him or anything, and at that age I don't even think I knew who Elvis was anyway. It was sort of irrelevant. The other thing I think this affecting tourism is not only global, the cost of travel, the global sort of financial issues that people have. It's just so expensive just to live, let alone to justify having a holiday. But also, I think that, but maybe also, certainly for people that perhaps live in Northern Europe, sort of Scandinavia and the UK, for example, global warming, I think Europe's getting hotter. Certainly, I remember, I think it was last year, where places in the UK and in Northern Europe were hitting sort of 35 degrees, 36 degrees, and they were saying that some cities in Europe were hotter than like Athens or Morocco. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah, I think that global climate is changing. Perhaps people that maybe would travel further east for a certain climate, certainly to get away from the cold winters in Europe, maybe they can enjoy not having to travel quite so far. That also, I think, being said, there's a problem, I think, with a lot of Asia becoming a little bit too commercial nowadays. It's not unusual for people to take gap years. It's not unusual for people to go to Australia and then travel around, almost do like the Silk Road and travel around Asia. It's not unusual anymore. Backpackers are two a penny in places like Thailand's not a backpacker paradise anymore. It's huge tourism. It is quite expensive in Thailand. It's expensive in a lot of Asia. It wasn't like budget cheap where you could get room, board, a meal, get completely drunk and end up in bed with a woman all for the cost of $5. It's not going to cost you that anymore. It's going to cost you a lot more. That's good for the local economy. If people want cheap and backpack, they're going to places like Africa now, not Asia so much. Cambodia's opened up. Vietnam. It's not unusual. Whereas before, when I was sort of in my 20s, in the 90s, it was unusual for people to go to Cambodia. People were starting to go to places like Thailand. I certainly did in the early 90s, and it was still thought of sort of exotic almost. Going to Thailand now is two a penny. It's just like going to Spain for somebody from Europe. Going to Cambodia before was unheard of, certainly because of all the issues with the Khmer Rouge and the killing fields in the past and a horrific history. But it's got a wonderful ancient history. And so Cambodia, I think, has become more of a destination for people longer term. People before just used to perhaps live in Thailand and go and visit Cambodia. Now living in Cambodia is relatively popular, and I've had a couple of messages on my YouTube channel, a couple of comments about, I don't live in Thailand anymore, I've moved to Cambodia, it's much better value for money. Well, horses for courses, it depends what you want. I visited Cambodia and I lived in Thailand, and it was okay, but this is going back 25 years or so, and I always felt Thailand had the edge on Cambodia. Things are kind of different now. Well, maybe not right now because they seem to be fighting with each other and throwing missiles at each other. But in the fullness of time, I think Cambodia is certainly an option. Nobody ever thought of Vietnam as a destination to live, to visit maybe, yeah. And obviously because of the French colonization of Vietnam years ago, there's that kind of fusion between Eastern cuisine and French cuisine. And in some very civilized areas of places like Hanoi in Vietnam, they wake up and they have croissants and baguettes for breakfast. It's very civilized and wonderful coffee, which is amazing, considering you're in Asia. But there's that sort of French influence. There isn't so much the Spanish influence, I don't think, so much in the Philippines. Certainly you'd think, well, if there was such a Spanish influence, apart from Catholicism, in the Philippines, where's the paella, or paella? Where is it? Where's the Spanish wine? It doesn't exist. So there are differences in certain Asian countries, and Asian tourism, it's expensive to travel, so people aren't traveling quite as frequently. In Philippines, quite recently, there's been a couple of deaths of Korean tourists, and the Korean transport authorities tourism authorities, beg your pardon, have advised against all but essential travel to the Philippines. So that has put off a lot of Koreans because they hear these scary stories of tourists getting mugged, and unfortunately recently one of them shot for only the 5,000 peso that he had in his bag, which was just shocking. Recently, just down the road here. But that's unusual. It's very unusual. It's a bit like in Thailand. Apart from petty theft, Thais normally fight with Thais. They don't fight with foreigners unless they can help it. Not deaths. It's more unusual because it creates. There's too much fuss about it. There's too much of a media storm. So generally it's avoided. Same in the Philippines. A lot of the shootings and deaths and the dangers all really happen amongst infighting with Filipinos, or the legal system, or corruption, or it's political. It's not amongst Filipinos and foreigners. It just generally doesn't happen. Of course there's exceptions to the rule, and that's why it's shocking when it does happen, because it is unusual. Some people fear the Philippines, and yet the vast majority of the time, the Philippines is wonderfully friendly. I've just come back from walking the dog, and I just say hello to everybody. Even guys that only know my acquaintance, they sort of nod with them as they pass by on a motorbike, walking the dog. People say hello, give a nice big smile. You don't get that in a lot of places. I remember when I was struggling with my young son when he was still in a stroller, struggling around London. Nobody stopped and helped me. Nobody opened up doors for me. It was a real struggle until I went north. I went north towards Manchester and then up to Edinburgh. And then surprise, surprise, the more north you go in the UK, the friendlier it gets. My home city of Bristol, it was horrible. They were pig ignorant. But I went up towards Manchester, and I was at Manchester train station. People were holding doors open for me, helping me out, asking me if they could get things off the shelf for me. Even though I'm tall, I have my bags and I have my son with me and everything else. And in Scotland, guys were carrying my luggage onto the train for me, helping me off. It was fantastic. And I got a wonderful story. I was in, I think it's Royal Mile, is it, in Edinburgh? And it was the Edinburgh Fringe, so it was packed with all these festival goers. And this bar was fully booked. It was in the afternoon, and I drank then, and I fancied having a pint of cider, which, if you don't know, is like a bit like lager or beer, but it's made out of apples. And being a West Country boy, I love cold cider, and I fancied a pint of cider. And I'm just there with my son in a pushchair, and I said to this bouncer, am I okay to bring him in? And this really burly Scottish guy, a bit like Braveheart, sort of looked at me and said, yeah, laddie, you just sit there. And he went inside and got me a pint of cider, kicked two people off of a table outside, and allowed me to sit outside with my son next to me whilst I'm drinking the pint. And he took my money. And I went and paid. Now, that would have never have happened in London. It would never have happened in my home city. But sure, the further north you go, people help you out. I'm struggling on the train with my bags in my baby stroller, like the baby buggy and my son. And people are helping me out, which is just amazing. You get that when you get older in the Philippines. When you're in your 70s plus in the Philippines, although it's a terrible place to live if you're non-able-bodied and you're in a wheelchair, for example, there's hardly any pavements or sidewalks or anything, apart from, say, in more upmarket places like Makati or BGC in Manila, and some places around like Ayala and IT district in Cebu. There aren't any real sidewalks or pavements, as they're called in the UK, for people to get around in wheelchairs. But certainly when you go into establishments, if you're elderly, people generally respect their elders. They do in Thailand as well. And if you're older, they do, certainly in the Philippines, they fast track you. You don't have to wait so much in a queue. People are prepared to help you out. It's not really a problem. Families help people out when they're older. And when I've said in a few of my other videos about family, that can be a real pain in the butt if you're a foreigner, because you're expected to do your thing and to help them out. But the flip side of that is when you're older, there's that support structure there. And there's a wonderful post online which I'd like to read out to you, because I wasn't going to do a little monologue today, but I thought, I might as well talk about tourism. And is it really down? Well, yes, it is, but it's not a Filipino or an Asian thing. I think it's a global issue, and mass tourism which the Chinese seem to do, are just people ferried in like cattle, like herds of cattle. They're in buses and they go here, they eat there, they go here, they eat there. Everything's organized for them. And you see them a bit like people that go to rock concerts or music festivals. And instead of being in the moment and enjoying it, they're filming it all through their camera, you know. You see a lot of these Chinese that go to these places and they see these sites. They don't even get out of the tour bus. They're taking pictures from inside, you know, against the glass. Just crazy. They won't even go outside to go and to look at the monument. So they'll take their pictures and they, oh, okay, we've done that, seen that. Right, next, on to the next one. So it's not real immersive tourism like it is for a lot of Westerners when they go east. The Chinese people, they just get herded around together, and you see a lot of the tour guys holding up their flags, follow me, and they all just get ferried around. And the local businesses, I can understand them getting really frustrated, because local business said, look, all right, there might be X number of million Chinese tourists coming to Thailand or Philippines or Vietnam, but we don't see them because they're not spending money in the local stores, the local restaurants, the local shops. They're not doing it because they're getting herded into places where the tour operators are getting a backhander for bringing them in. That's how it all works. So I do feel sorry for the locals, because, yeah, they're not making as much money as perhaps they should. I think also demographics has a part to play in that we're currently at the tail end of like the baby boomers, and you know, I'm nearly 60. And I think people that are coming up to retirement now, maybe they've worked for a relatively long, prolonged period of time with 1 or 2 or 3 companies. They've had a career. Nowadays, the younger generation, their jobs aren't quite as secure. They do chop and change. Sometimes they work remotely. Sometimes they're on 0-hour contracts, so which is worth jack shit. You know, it's not worth the paper it's written on. It's just company can hire and fire people like that, you know, as required. And so I feel sorry for a lot of the young people now. I feel sorry for my son when he grows up and he needs to get a job. Things aren't as secure as they once were. AI has taken over a lot of the jobs. Okay, not everything, but it's taken over a lot of the processing jobs, BPO jobs, call center jobs. It's answering phones and everything else. Yeah, there's probably more opportunities now for software development and systems maintenance people that help run and manage AI systems. Yeah, if you're that sort of analytical and that way inclined, but if you're more manual labor wise, well, yeah, if you're a Filipino OFW, you can go and work on a fishing trawler, you can go and work on a cruise ship, cleaning toilets or cooking food. People always got to eat and stuff. But all of the architect, somebody I know is training to be an architect, but the company that is paying her sort of scholarship and helping funding her, it's got 1 more year to go, and normally it's a job for life with a famous firm of London architects. And she's mixed race. She's 50-50 Filipino and English, and she's normally would be guaranteed a job after she finishes and she graduates. But she's just recently been told by this top firm of architects in London that there isn't a job available for her when she graduates, because a lot of the essential calculating and design work and everything else is all being done by AI now, and over just rubber stamped by the top architects. There is no need for a lot of architects anymore. It's very worrying what's happening. And so demographic wise, there are people retiring now, but what after this last tranche of baby boomers retire, then what? A lot of people that are struggling to work and find a job, those that have got a job don't feel as secure as they once were. There's no such thing as a job for life now. Sure, you can be self-employed, you know, and that kind of mentality of, you know, if it's to be, it's up to me. I'm in charge of my own destiny. Well, that's all very well if you can get work, but it's very, very hard. And certain countries like the UK, although it's very easy to set up a company or an LLC, for example, there's a lot of red tape to jump through when it comes to employing somebody, taking people on, paying their salaries, compulsory pension contributions, hikes in national insurance, which a lot of small companies are suffering from now, because the current government promised not to put up income tax, so they just do it through the back door by bumping up national insurance for corporations, and it's really throttling them. And it's a sad state of affairs. It's just getting worse. And unfortunately, the top 1% of wealthy people are getting more and more and more and more and more of the money. They're getting more of the take. And it is very much that same old saying, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And there's a huge divide now with the skiers spending kids' inheritance. And the skiers, the silver surfers, the wealthy people are in their 60s, 70s and 80s now, because they bought property years ago in their home countries. They got pension schemes, savings and everything else. They've benefited from saving in the 70s and 80s when they had 15% interest rates. Who needs to invest in the stock market when you're getting 15% on cash? You know, those days are gone now. You're getting the square root of virtually zero, and then you're getting taxed to the hilt as well. Anybody that's very, very wealthy, if their tax take in a particular country they consider to be uncompetitive, they're just going to move. It's a big problem in the UK at the moment. There's talk that they will impose a higher rate of tax, but a lot of the experts, financiers, are saying, don't make it too much, because you're just going to push even more wealthy people abroad, and they're just going to leave the UK, as indeed is relevant to the last video I did about the UK exodus of wealth. And that's a big thing. And it's very, very similar to, I think it was Oxfam. I can remember I was going from Bristol to London on a business meeting, and I got the local train. I was at a local train station, and I'm waiting for the train to come, and opposite me on the other platform was this big poster, and it said something like 5% of the world's population owns 95% of the wealth, and 97% of the world's population lives on less than $1 a day. And I let that sink in, and I've never forgot it, because I was thinking, and I was going to a business meeting, and I was hoping to make quite a bit of money out of this client, which I did do, which was great. But it was very humbling. I think it was Oxfam, the charity in the UK, or it might have been Save the Children. I'm not entirely sure. It may well have been Save the Children charity or Oxfam. But those two statistics, let that sink in. And I don't think it's improved. 5% of the population of the world owns 95% of the assets, 95% of the money, which is just incredible. And like 97% of the world's population lives on less than $1 a day. So if you're surviving on more than that, you've got to consider yourself lucky. And then of all of those figures, it's the top 1%, which have got virtually everything, and the rest of us are just mere minions. But it's frightening, and it's a frightening statistic that the rich are getting richer. And unless it's made wealth, amassed wealth, when you're younger from digital marketing, inventing an app, doing something fantastic and wonderfully clever, you know, you'll get the odd exceptions, like the Elon Musks of this world that sort of got a great habit of inventing stuff and getting criticised for it. But then lo and behold, you know, sleeping in his office in Tesla when it was virtually bankrupt, and he had to beg, borrow and steal money to keep the company afloat, and everybody was laughing at him saying it's going to go downhill. EVs, electric vehicles, are just a nonsense. It's never going to work. Look where we are now. Same with SpaceX and everything else he's got himself involved with. The Boring Company, which is absolute cash cow, which he's sort of simplified the process of tunneling. Wonderful stuff. You get these exceptions. You get these kind of like Iron Men, but the vast majority of everybody else are just wage slaves. And that's always been a case where if you want to remain poor, you basically live to work, and you don't have a good quality of life. You live to work. You don't work to live. It's unusual, and it's a privilege if you're able to work to live, whereby you could just use work as a conduit to earn money to enjoy yourself and have that balance. Most people haven't got that privilege. Most people nowadays simply, it's all about survival. So when they've got hikes in local taxes, council taxes, mortgages or rent, lots of expenses if they run a car or a motorcycle, the gasoline, the petrol, everything else, food bills, hospitals and insurances and things like that. It's all just going up in price, and yet salaries exponentially aren't going up at the same rate unless you get promoted. So the last thing on people's minds really is going on holiday? Can they justify going on holiday? They're going to go to our gate, they're going to go to our gate, as in the garden gate. That's if they've got a garden. And they're not going to go away. And those that do go away, probably it's not every year, it's a once every 2 or 3 years as a special treat because they've earned it. Certainly if you're younger and you're married, you're looking to marry and have a family, you want the privacy of living on your own, but renting, and it's hellishly expensive. How are they going to do it? So the last thing on their mind is tourism. So I don't think it's the fault of Thailand or Cambodia or Vietnam or the Philippines if tourism numbers are down. It's essentially an affordability crisis for a lot of people. And the people that are long stay expats, so the tail end of the baby boomers now, I think will be the last of it. The people that you will see now being longer term expats, I think, will be remote workers, digital nomads, people that are able to earn money online. They don't need an office. At the very most, they hot desk. So they only need to be in the office like once or twice a month. The rest of the time they can be wherever they want. Working remotely with fast internet connections is something that is just simply is possible now. Before I read out this lovely message that I read, the last thing is that when somebody talks online about, well, they're not sure whether or not to go to Thailand or the Philippines, and sort of compare the two, and you cannot compare the two. They are vastly different countries. Although they're both in sort of Southeast Asia, because of the American influence, Philippines is vastly different to what is definitely more of an Asian vibe that you get in Thailand. And Catholicism in the Philippines as opposed to Buddhism predominantly in Thailand. And also, if you're going on a holiday and you want to just drive somewhere and randomly go into a hotel, you can go to Thailand, and there are some the vast majority of hotels are fantastic and great value for money. A couple of thousand baht is going to get you a nice room, air conditioning, beautiful Asian silk spreads and stuff, and bed sheets, and just wonderful. Sometimes outside, inside shower rooms with pebbles, very kind of Bali inspired. Absolutely beautiful Thailand. Even the hotels in places like Pattaya and Bangkok and Hua Hin, etc. You can get wonderful value for money, even 4-star. It can be great value for money. In the Philippines, I think there's so many business permits. There's so many people robbing Peter to pay Paul. You've got local municipal permits, national barangay. You've got barangay permits. You've got mayor's permits. You've got provincial permits. You've got national permits. You've got permits for fire, permits for health. You've got so many, and you see them. You go into any business, you see all these permits behind the wall. It's just an absolute minefield. Everybody's on the take. Every single government department seems to be on the take, and they want a piece of your business. So that just pushes up prices. And value for money in the Philippines for hotels compared to Thailand? No way. No way. Don't even come close. You'll get some damp little rabbit hutch, for the price of a 4-star place in Bangkok. It's just there's just no comparison whatsoever. Service with a smile? Well, yeah, you get a great service with a smile. Whether something's in stock or not, when you order it in a restaurant, a lot of the times it's off the menu in the Philippines. The frustrations of the Philippines, when you compare Philippines and Thailand, there isn't really a comparison. Thailand is just so far ahead. However, the one thing I've always said about the Philippines, well, why be in the Philippines rather than Thailand? And I'm like, well, my son's obviously 50-50, Filipino and British, and he's going to school. Do I like Thailand? Yeah. Do I like Philippines? Yeah. If I wanted to sit down and have a drink with a table of strangers, you can do that in the Philippines with local Filipinos, guys and girls. Can you do that in Thailand? Not really. Most expats would sort of agree with me that you wouldn't normally go and sit down with a group of Thai men and start drinking or whatever and chatting to them the vast majority of the time. Whereas in Philippines, you could. And the vast majority of the time, you'll have a fantastic time, and they'll probably end up giving you a drink and getting you to sing karaoke. And just, they want to sort of bond with you. They're very, very friendly. I'm not being naive. That there are dangerous places everywhere, and Philippines included. But you could sit down with a table full of strangers in the Philippines, and before you know it, you've met your best friends that you might know 10, 15, 20 years later. They can be that friendly. Does that happen in Thailand with local Thai men? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It just doesn't. There are exceptions. I've got a couple of friends that are Thai, but they were working in like a very high-class establishment, and both in managerial positions. It was different. In the street, going to a local little bar full of Thai people, sitting down and making friends with them? No, not if you're Westerner, because you'll always be Falang, you'll always be alien, you'll always be a foreigner. I think it's far more friendly in the Philippines with the locals. That's not to say it's any safer or more dangerous in either one country. As far as advancement and modernization, Philippines is way, way, way behind Thailand. Now, what I'd like to finish off is I'll read this, because I always talk and try and instill the importance of genuine relationships. I know there's guys out there that will criticize me because I talk about the lack of mental stimulation if you've got a large age gap with a guy in his 60s and his girlfriend's just about 20. You're not going to get mental stimulation and intelligent conversation. Sorry, you're not, because you're decades more experienced than they are. You're just not going to do it. But you're probably not being with her for the mental stimulation, are you? But hey ho, this came about in a post very recently. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's by a Norwegian guy. And I'll just read it out, and then you'll get to where I'm coming from, about the importance of being with somebody from a sincerity point of view that's similar to you in age. Don't have to be exact. I mean, 10 or 15 years age difference, fine, it's not a problem. But when you're talking about 30 years age difference, come on guys, get real. And this what this guy wrote was fantastic, and I'll just read it out to you without further ado. So, I've now lived in the Philippines for nearly 18 years, and it's been over 42 years since I first came. Back then, I was 23 years old, travelling around Asia without any fixed plans. I was young and searching, just taking life as it came. The president was Ferdinand Marcos, and 1 Norwegian krona gave me a little over 3 pesos. I had no idea this country would one day become my home. 7 years later, so he was 23, so 7 years later when he was 30. 7 years later, I met Jemima, my great love, on Boracay. We married, had 2 children, and after 16 years in Norway, we moved back here. We first settled on Boracay, but when our daughter turned 16 and her schooling needs changed, we decided to move to Iloilo City. We liked the city right away, even though life here was very different from Boracay. But it had everything we needed, and we've lived here ever since 2011. After a year, I bought a car, and it felt good to be behind the wheel again after 5 years on foot. And in brackets, he put, I have over 23 years experience as a taxi driver in Oslo. Obviously, that's in Norway. Since then, I've driven nearly 175,000 kilometres in and around Iloilo. I still enjoy every ride. I don't let Filipino traffic stress me out. I'm never in a rush, and I prefer to save my energy for the more important things in life. Filipino traffic is in a world of its own, but I don't have any short temper, and I'm not easily rattled. A couple of years ago, the temperature climbed well over 35 degrees. We noticed how tired and thirsty the traffic officers looked as they stood for hours in the sun. We started handing out cold bottles of water to them. Nothing fancy, just a small gesture. Today, many of them recognise us. They smile, wave, and greet us as we pass by. It's become a small joy in our everyday life, for them and for us, I think. Growing older here is different than it would have been back in Norway. Back home, I probably would have ended up sitting alone a lot. Here, I still feel like I'm part of society. I'm seen, spoken to, welcomed, and with warmth. That means a lot. Sure, I sometimes miss order and structure, but it's more than balanced by the sense of community, vibrancy, and closeness. And that's typical of Philippine culture. And the help I get from Jemima in everyday life is invaluable. She does what she can to make things easier as the challenges of aging slowly come. She's a gift from Jehovah. One day I'll probably have to hand over the car keys, but until then I still have plans. I'd like to explore more of the Philippines, maybe head south to Mindanao or north to Luzon. We've spent a lot of time on Panay and we've visited Negros, Cebu and Bantayan, but there's always more to discover. So the days go by with small joys, new plans and gratitude for how life has turned out. Now guys, that's a beautiful story and it extols the virtues of how you marry for the right reasons. There's not a huge age gap between these guys and it's wonderful, and it's very important that you get you're with somebody that is going to be able to take care of you when you're no longer able to take care of yourself. And you guys that have got massive age gaps, you've got to question whether you're going to be able to do that. Say hello to a man's best friend. This is Spud, which for you Brits will know that Spud is a nickname for a potato. And when he was a puppy, he looked like a little potato with 4 legs. And my son's autistic, so he had slow speech development. So Spud is just a one syllable word, so it was easy for him to pronounce. Anyway, he's getting a bit old now, aren't you, Spud? Eh? But good boy nonetheless. So it is important, I think, when you have relationships to consider when you get older. A lot of people that are playboys in their 50s and 60s, you've got to be careful, guys, because when you get older, you're not going to get the loyalty of somebody that's perhaps a little bit closer to your age. If you're 70 and you've got a partner who's 40 or 50, that's fine. They're mature enough that they want to take care of you. But if you're in your 70s and you've got, or 60s, and you've got a partner who's just out of her teens, you got to question whether or not they are really going to be there for you later in your life. They might not be. They might just bugger off when you need them. You need them the most. You're the most dependent and you're the most vulnerable. And if you're elderly and single, you're very vulnerable. Life's not so much fun then, is it? I hope you found this monologue of interest. My next video is all about TRT treatment, which a lot of people have asked about, and I'm due to have a video conference with a doctor tomorrow, so look out for that one. If you've not already done so, please like and subscribe. Tell some other fellow expats or people looking to become expats about my channel. It does help me a lot. As always, watch my other videos for other topics that I discuss relevant to health and wealth, being an expat, irrespective of where you are currently or where you might end up becoming an expat when you live abroad. Thank you so much.